Hi, welcome to this video on the best method selection, and this is specifically as part of the best method selection when the transfer pricing issue to be determined is an intangible. So there are specified methods for transfer pricing for intangibles in the U.S. regulations, and there are three of them that come to mind immediately. The first is the comparable uncontrolled transaction, or CUT as it's usually called. The second is the profit split method. And the third is using the comparable profits method, which you probably hear most people refer to as the CPM, which is highly similar to the transactional net margin method as it's described in the OECD. I'll also mention that when we talk about the very first method there, the comparable uncontrolled transaction or CUT, within the language of the OECD guidelines, that will just be referred to as a comparable uncontrolled price. They don't make a distinction between this type of approach, whether you're using it for a tangible or an intangible good. Well, what is the purpose of the best method selection? It's required under 482 that you pick the method that, under the facts and circumstances, provides the most reliable measure of an arm's length result. That's the direct quote. And so it doesn't give a great deal of guidance about what would be the most reliable, but it does tell you some of the things you need to be thinking about. And in particular, it really wants you to focus on what is the degree of comparability between the uncontrolled transactions that you can identify and the controlled transaction that you're performing the analysis of. And that will be very important in determining whether you feel you have enough comparability that will produce a reliable analysis. The other issue to take into account is whether in the execution of the method one needs to make assumptions and or forecast data. And so the quality of the data and the assumptions used in the analysis can be important. This is in particularly going to be important to assessing whether the profit split method is a reasonable method, and largely because one may need to forecast out where one thinks profits are going to be, and that's always an exercise that's got some degree of unreliable nature to it or uncertainty associated with it. So the purpose of the best method is to pick the most reliable method, the one that is best going to approximate what would have been priced between two parties operating at arm's length. We're going to use the most reliable data that's available to us, and often we have to pick the method based upon what data is available. Sometimes we don't get the option of being able to execute a method simply because we can't observe data for that particular method. We'd like to use the data that has the fewest adjustments possible. That an adjustment doesn't necessarily knock a method out of the park, but it does say you're making an assumption when you make an adjustment that still may be the most reliable compared to alternatives, but one needs to minimize those if possible. And the selection process involves evaluating the different possible methods that you can consider, all the various ones that are available to you. And you should always remember that you can always apply an unspecified method if you think you have something that is economically sound and is going to be more reliable than the specified methods within the regulations.